Hello and welcome to the Band of One podcast. I am Riley Wilson, and this podcast is designed for anybody that wants to start or get better at either a solo act or a small group like a duo or trio. I've got over 50 years of live performance experience that will include tips from other working pros in other parts of the country that have found what works best for them. If you like what we do, please subscribe and hit the like button. Let's continue with part 2 of my interview with Carolina's beach music winner, Freddy Tripp. Freddie, one of the things that we talked briefly about, and unfortunately because I hit the wrong button, we didn't record the previous podcast for 2, but I want to talk a little bit about songwriting because you've had a lot of luck in that area.
Moderate amount. I'm not. It's an everyday process. You kind of got to do it every day to get real good at it. I know people that can sit down and do it every day, but unfortunately, you really do have to be dedicated. I think we spoke briefly on collaboration and things like that. I encourage that because another set of ears, another brain involved. You know, certain people are better at doing music. Some people are better at doing the lyrics and telling the story, and I know where I'm not as good at telling the story as a lot of other people are, but then again, they may not be as well as putting the idea into music. So it's all about it's a process, and to work, it's like anything else. The more you work at it, the better you get.
So, a question along those lines, because I said you've had several successful records with the Fantastic Shakers as well as other people. When you songwriting, would it be fair to say that you've done the majority or more of the music than the lyrical part of it?
Yeah, that would be safe to say. And most of the things that I've had the best luck with is when somebody else came up with the idea, and then a few words, and then maybe vary on that. You can bounce, and not only is it better to get a better quality, it's also good to bounce ideas off somebody else as well. And see what works, because things, particularly with lyric writing. Uh, it seems best to me that sometimes what may be correct from a linguistic point of view doesn't necessarily work with the songwriting, because and then you also have to you have to make the lyric flow where it fits a melody that you come up with, and you know I'm very rhythm oriented, so particularly in the genre that I had worked in, it was all about making records danceable and that sort of thing, and rhythmically making the lyrics fit rhythmically where they make sense.
Absolutely.
It's a work in progress, and I know people that are great at it. After doing it for a long time, I still feel like I'm a novice at it. So
It's
it's
interesting. Both you and Yancey Stevens, and Yancey's originally from South Carolina. Both of you guys have talked about the importance of songwriting. And while I didn't really plan for us to go down that road, I find it interesting because you told me that when you did a lot of your songwriting, that it was aimed at a particular audience, which was beach music, which we covered in our first podcast. And also, you
right.
work with a group called the Fantastic Shakers for over a quarter of a century, and a lot of those writings were figured, okay, how are these guys going to do that? Pete Townshend said that when he was writing for The Who, he would write knowing that Roger Daltrey's going to sing the lyric and John Entwistle's going to do
Sure.
the bass part and Keith's on the drums. And also, what can we do in a four-piece band? I also got amused when I heard that Kevin Cronin of REO Speedwagon would say with Gary Richrath in the early days, if we write and record this song, is it going to go over at a bar?
Yeah, well, and quite honestly, that's very much the same sentiment that we kind of had too, because even though on every project that we did, we would do some covers of some songs for one reason or other. We felt like fit the mold of it. It may have been an old obscure R&B song people didn't that people weren't very familiar with, but it fit the genre. So we'd adapt it, put our own swing on it. But then in the process of doing that, you kind of wanted to come up with some. Hey, I got an idea for a song. I looked in the mirror one day and I didn't like what I saw. So good looks are a light switch away. Cut the light off. So that's that. It's weird the way sometimes the idea comes to you. Whether it's being about country songs always. I always think that country songs always tell the best stories. Because nothing that, but because except for, particularly earlier country, it's the thing about that. It's about telling the story, about the heartbreak, about your mama, about all the cliches, all the things, all the stories that are cliches. But you know what? Uh, I'm working with a songwriter named Charlie Sattenfield right now, who's had some success from Nashville, and he sent me a song the other day that is uh that I just thought was so cool. It was about, it's called Zeb Code 33. It's about going fishing with his granddaddy, which is, it's great, and all it is you regurgitating the memory, and that's what, if a song can trigger an emotion, trigger a memory, or trigger happiness, or trigger sadness, that's when you know you kind of got something. So, and I am by no means a well-versed songwriter. I stab at it, but I hope that the next one I write is better than the last one, and so on and so on. So it's, without getting into all the A's and B's of songwriting. That's, I'm, like I said, compared to so many people that do it all the time, I'm just a novice. I've done it by necessity. Does it sound good in a bar?
Yeah.
Getting back to that.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of validity to that. Speaking of songwriting and recording stuff, you have your own studio. You had your own studio for many, many years, and like myself, you learned very well the technical part of recording MIDI and all those
Sure.
kinds of things. And take us up to where you are right now. You have a studio in your home,
Sure. Yes.
and you're using what kind of? I think we talked briefly about this. What kind of a DAW are you using? DAW, for those of you that don't know, stands for Digital Audio Workstation, and it's basically a computer software program that will allow you to record MIDI, which is basically ones and zeros to trigger an outside instrument or a different source, as well as audio, which could be a real voice or a harmonic or a banjo or whatever. So, what are you
uh,
using for that?
my main format is Digital Performer, because as a keyboard player, I started on Performer, which was, I started with the MIDI, and then they added the audio aspect of it. But that's the one that's my go-to, because number one, I've been using it longer. So if I have to get in and do some fine editing or things like that, I'm better on that than I am anything else. But I also use Pro Tools because it's an industry standard. I
Sure.
also use Logic because a lot of people on Apple use Logic, so I can get around on all of those. And a lot of it, and on occasion Cubase. I've used Ableton Live. And got very basic sometimes with Audacity and things like
Yeah.
that. Even though it
Yeah.
doesn't have all the pro features, it's
Sure.
you can get it up quick and get a track in and out and that sort of thing. But like I said, Digital Performance is my main one, but Pro Tools and Logic, uh, I'm also versed well enough to do, particularly if you're collaborating
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
someone else who has that. It makes it a little easier on their end.
Absolutely.
You can send a whole file, over the internet, and they can send it back to you. Okay, well, there's my WAV file. That's what I need in my DAW.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's kind of how that's evolved.
That really has changed the whole recording world, because if you've got a
Sure.
buddy that lives in Victoria, British Columbia, who's a great, blues harmonica player, you can say, "Hey, man, let me send you the files and record a couple of solos over that." And it really has changed the way a lot of us work, hasn't it?
Very, very definitely. I mean, in fact, the even though I do have a studio in my house, I mean, the times, I can count on my fingers the times in the past year that I've actually had more than one person at a time over recording. I've got an isolation room for that, for vocals or horns or whatever else. But I'm using I use a guitar player that lives in Nashville. I use a sax player that actually is an hour or so down the road, and I've used other string players that live in Tennessee or Arkansas or Texas. So it does. And in fact, I even had a project that the client wanted an orchestral harp on, and I didn't know a local one that. I
Wow.
knew one, and she was really good, but she didn't want to bring her harp in my studio, and I don't blame her, because those things are heavy.
They
Well,
are.
I went on uh, air gigs, and I found a lady in Argentina that could. It was a small part. It wasn't a main part of the song. It was like a part for color. And I found a lady in apparently she had some symphony experience, and she lived in Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Wow.
and got her to do a harp part, and it worked out fine. She was versed enough that she had a decent recording set up, and for what it worked for the song.
When you
And
use, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, I mean that's pretty extreme. But I had my buddy in Nashville he does a lot of guitar work through Air Gigs, and he had told me about it. I said, well, I'll look, and it's not the most there's not harp players aren't there's not 10 or 11 of them waiting around the corner. You
That's
kind of got
true.
to. I'm not talking about a harmonica. I'm talking about an orchestral harp.
Yeah,
Those things
absolutely.
that are 5 feet tall and weigh about 300 pounds.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Absolutely. And it's interesting because one of the things about this, in fact, that's what I was going to ask next. When you use your sequences that you play along with on your solo gigs, do you ever have parts that were recorded like a guitar part or a banjo part or whatever that recorded by somebody else on those sequences?
I do on occasion. I do on occasion, and it depends on. Uh, it depends on. I try to do as much as I can, but I realize I'm better on keys and trumpet and horn than I am on guitar. And we have to realize our skill set. And see what it's because when push comes to shove, and it all comes down to it when you're out there in front of entertainment. But I'm not trying to cut a corner, but most people out there don't care where the guitar part came from.
That's absolutely true. In fact,
They just want to be entertained. They want good quality
yeah,
music.
they
So
they want. Does
I
it
don't feel
sound?
guilty about it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I got a couple of fellows in my church Sunday school class that were high school guys to play the trumpet parts on Ring of Fire, and it goes over
Right.
like gangbusters. Any crowd I play for, and it was a good experience for them. I paid them a small amount of money, and I brought them in here and put them in the booth one at a time, and we ended up recording 4 trumpet parts, and it sounds really good. And so I
Sure.
think one of the great things about that, if you do want to get into using a DAW and have a project studio, which is what I have, Freddy's is certainly bigger than that, but be able to do what
Not
you like
much
to
so.
do at
Not
your
much.
house, it's a really, really wonderful thing. When you started working solo stuff, and we talked briefly about this, but give me an idea of kind of where you find solo gigs, because that's a little bit different from somebody calling and wanting the shakers and your big show for a
Sure.
convention center gig.
Well, my first gigs were through some people I knew that had places. A guy that had a lakeside bar about an hour or so from me had all I kind of stayed in touch with over. He was a friend, but he was a fan of the Shakers, of course. He had always said, "Well, anytime you get ready to do anything, let me know." And and months later, I said, "Well, I might do something after the first year." Well, he happened to call me one day, and I said, "Well, you know what, Tommy, I'm going to start out here in a month or so." And so he said, "Well, come on down and play." So I did that, and then uh, it went over pretty well. And I went back and played a couple weeks later, and then my butt and I had mentioned there was a few places around here that did the same sort of thing, and so I just started beating the bushes a little bit. And but the main thing I did to really get gigs was I put myself together a video. I had a buddy who had some nice video equipment, had a green screen and all of that, and I got him to make me promotion video. And so what basically I went and did snippets of 8 or 10 songs, maybe not that many. I put together about a 4-minute video with just snippets of songs, and put it out on YouTube. I got a website. I put it on that, and that right there, especially when you're cold calling, worked out good because a lot of times they'd see a video, they see the type of a sample of the type of stuff I doing, and seeing that it was of good quality. Yeah, we want to do that. So that's how it started. And I did everything, started doing, a few little restaurant bars. And then I actually started doing some senior centers because they're everywhere. And it's a good way. Those particular kind of things, usually you only play for an hour. And it's great practice to break in your material and see how it does. And since I do in my regular repertoire, I do a lot of classic oldies type stuff. That works for them. I do a lot of. I'll do things in that I might not play in a bar or a restaurant,
Sure.
but I also do things in a bar or restaurant that I wouldn't play in that. So uh, the main thing is get a wide cross section of material so you can cover as many bases as possible in a situation. Now, being able to read the crowd and see what you need to play, that just comes with experience.
Yeah, yeah. Let's address this for just a moment because I think one of the interesting things about what you do, what I do, what some other folks that I know that are successful do, and that is we have a wide variety of material. I'm a guitar teacher, so I can play some classical stuff. I can do tons of smooth jazz and traditional jazz. I do country stuff, rock stuff, pop stuff, some blues stuff.
Sure.
And you do a wide variety of that kind of material too, right?
Right. Not I do a few light jazz things, and the advantage of being a keyboard player is you can go in there and you can do real book songs. I don't typically read them, but I can if I have to. But a lot of these songs I've played at some point over the years, and I don't do a lot of solo piano gigs, but I can do them.
Sure.
And it's nice to be able to if you have to pull something out of there, be able to do it. And I can play good enough guitar that I can, you know, hey, I got to hear John Denver Country Roads. Okay, here it. I'll kick it off. Almost heaven, West Virginia. And that certain songs like that work fine with just an acoustic guitar. It just
Absolutely.
depends, and it's all about entertaining the people you're playing for
Sure,
sure.
sure. I mean, we've talked about this before about the importance of reading the crowd, and I think that's one of the reasons why you, both as a solo performer and also with other groups like the Shakers, have had that kind of success. Let's talk about the gear that you drag on a solo gig because you may or may not have as much equipment that you would take for a full band gig, right?
No, definitely not. But particularly, usually, particularly if it's a 1 hour job or something, say for a senior center or for a wedding, like a wedding ceremony or a celebration of life, something like that. You might only play an hour. I carry a 61 note keyboard that's got stock sounds. I don't need keyboards with big giant synth engines built into them and all this sampling stuff. And I don't necessarily need an 88 key weighted
Sure.
88
Yeah,
key weighted keyboard for something like that when I'm on going to play. That's a lot of that is a thing that you kind of get used to it as feel. You want a real piano feel, but if you're only going to play an
absolutely.
hour,
Yeah.
that extra 30 or 40 pounds doesn't make sense to me. And I've got two main Bose systems, which is L1 Pro 16. I've got two of those towers, and I've also got two of the more compact S1 Pro speakers that I can stick up on a pole. And I'll use one or two some combination of those two things, depending on the situation, and particularly the volume level. Because a lot of times, if it's a very low volume, I can do just a fine job with one of the small S1 Pros, or the majority of them, I will carry one stack of the Bose L1 system, which is a subwoofer with a small column array
Yeah.
and that works for most. And then a small little 6 channel mixer, and I run my tracks off an iPad, and then just a vocal mic, and I'll carry a guitar most of the time, 99% of the time. It just depends. If I'm getting a situation that I'm not going to be playing many guitar songs, I may not carry my guitar. But I do
Yeah.
99 out of 100, I'll carry the guitar because I just like to change. And plus, there's certain songs that I want to play because you never know where you might have to pull up a Jimmy Buffett or pull up a country song or something like that. So just be prepared. But I've got a medium size SUV, and I can get everything I need in that. You
That
know,
was going to be the next question is the transportation to and from. So since you've got lighter gear, I'm assuming
sure.
that certainly works better for those of us that have been doing this for a while. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, light is, you know, you can get spoiled. When you get the setup, when you do a couple of gigs, say in a week, that you got a real compact light setup, and then you have to just pull out a little bit more PA for a certain gig. I had 4 gigs last week, and 3 of them I was able to do a very compact setup. But then my fourth one, I was playing outside in a very wide open space, and I carried all my PA. And I mean, when I carry all my PA and my big keyboard and that sort of thing, it loads my car up, and it's an extra 20, 30 minutes to set up
Yeah.
and to tear down, not to mention how much heavier it is.
Yeah.
Ironically, I got there, and I didn't know it at the time, because I had my contact at that particular gig wasn't a technical person. I had seen some pictures, and I mean, they had an outdoor stage with a big old rock and roll PA on it. I mean, I'm going like, God Almighty, I better carry everything I got. Well, I got there, and I could have got by with one stack, because the way they had it worked, you could patch in. They
Yeah.
had these pretty big mushroom speakers all over the property. And they actually sounded really good. When I patched it in and walked around and listening to the recorded music to do sound check, it sounded great out there. I said, you know what? I didn't need to bring all of that. But, you live and learn from those
Well,
experiences.
sure. It's always
Yeah.
better to have too much than not enough. In fact,
Oh,
we should
actually.
probably we'll probably steal a word probably from your MBA studies here, and that's the word scalable, right?
Exactly.
Scalable gear, which means you need gear that you can do a small gig, a medium, or a large gig. And sometimes you won't know about that until you physically get there. So to have a
Sure.
smaller rig like a Bose, a little compact speaker, one of the big ones for a lot of folks like myself or you, and that is having something that runs on batteries. Because there's a lot of
Correct.
times you have things, for example, I did a wedding in East Texas last week, no amplification at all. And so that would have been a place where having a small battery powered rig would certainly work really well. And
Yeah, I haven't had to do that, but I have done that just to try it out. And it was a small 1 hour job. And the advantage of the Bose S1 series is they can run several hours on just battery powered. So
yeah,
I tried it out on a gig to see how it worked. And it's got a little 3 channel mix. I ran my tracks in one, I ran my keyboard in one channel, my guitar in one, and my tracks in another, and my mic, and I was able to do it even without a mixer. And
yeah.
so that, I don't that didn't it wasn't as flexible as I would have liked it, but it worked fine and sounded good.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's nice to have that option.
yeah. Like our buddy Phil Mazurek says, we were able to cover the job.
Exactly, exactly. And everybody was smiling when they left. So
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's talk about solo. What's the best part of playing solo for you?
just the flexibility of it, having control of your schedule, having control of the type of jobs that you're play. You don't have to be you don't have to uh you can do what you want to do, as opposed to having to take a lot of other people's feelings or needs into play. Because now I'm at the age, and I'm at the time. There's always sometimes there's family things that are going on. There's other things that I want to do uh, with friends and things like that I don't have to worry about. Hey, okay, it's okay to not work Saturday night.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely. Yeah,
and
that's
and plus
important.
it's football season. It's football
Yes,
season.
yes. Well, here's the thing, and I think you mentioned about this. The flexibility of being able to perform solo is a huge deal. As my buddy Michael Edwin Q pointed out, if an agent calls you for a job and you've got to get two or three other people that delay getting back to you, by the time you get back to the agent, the job is gone. And so
Sure,
being able to
exactly.
accept a job instantly, as I've said before, one of the awards that I've won on the Bash is the Rapid Responder Award. And I found out that if you get back with a client, if they contacted you within an hour or so, they're usually
Sure.
quite impressed about that. And oftentimes that's all the leverage that you need for the gig. Let's flip that on its side now. What's the most challenging part of or the less fun parts about playing solo?
Uh, it, I would think it would have sometimes when you're playing by yourself, you really do become as an agent once told me. He says sometimes you go there and you play and you're just like the aroma of the hot dog. You're just your background noise. And but when you go to the bank, the check's still clear, the check still cashes. That in particular, somebody who was more acclimated to playing in a more high energy environment and from front of some fairly large crowds a lot of times, and a high energy situation to not have that sometimes. Uh, if you're somebody that needs a lot of ego stroking, you might not necessarily get it.
Yeah.
But I'm at the point in my career now that I still need a little ego stroking, but not as much as I used to. I'd have to say that's really the downside. And it's just, but you know what? It's like everything else. Somebody asked me, said, "Well, do you miss that other part of it? You know, the big band." I said, I don't. I miss the people that I used to see a lot because over the course of time, you know, there was a lot of people that you might see on a regular basis, and I do miss a lot of them even to this day, and I do try to stay in touch with some of them. You know, but it's like I tell a lot of people though, I've got a lot of acquaintances. I don't have that many friends, but
Wow,
those are
that's great.
still people that, you know, particularly if somebody's come around and seen you for 10 or 15 years and supported you, you kind of want to you want to think them as friends because they've been supportive of you, but you don't get to see them, particularly if you don't travel as much as I do and play in those kind of venues before because I get since my proximity to North Myrtle Beach in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, is like three and a half hours from here. Uh, and for years and years and years, I played the beaches of the Carolinas for years and years,
Mhm.
and knew people from Virginia all the way down to Florida. I don't get to see those people anymore because number one, I'm not going to typically go play a lot of jobs three and a half hours away. Uh, you know, and so I won't see those people. But uh getting back to what you were saying, that's part of the downside of it, but that's also part of the upside. Somebody says, "Do you miss it?" I said, "Yes." I said, "But I wish I had done this 25 years ago." But 25 years ago, I didn't want to do this. I
Well,
wanted that. Uh,
and you know, it's interesting because there's a lot of things, for example, the smaller, lighter gear that we're using right now that we're so excited about
sure.
didn't work back then. It wasn't
No,
available back then.
no, it
And,
wasn't.
you know, 40 years ago, neither of us could have, I couldn't have done MIDI sequencing in 1983. It was just being introduced at the time. And so to be able to have these kinds of things, I think are real blessings. Let's continue on a vein right there. You said that the lovely Carolina beaches are only about a 3 hour drive from your house, but you're not driving. What do you have a travel radius that you'll do or not do these days?
Uh, I I do go down to the coast about once every 4 to 6 weeks, and it has to do with really that there's few people that I've developed since I've been doing the solo thing that I have gone down and worked for, but I try to do it in conjunction with visiting friends that I have down there for two reasons. Number one, I get to see them, and one reason I get to see them, and number two, I got a place to stay, so that cuts my travel expenses down. And I
Absolutely.
generally always do it in like 2 to 3 to 4 jobs. I call it the Great Circle Route because that's what I do. I do a circle around and I come back, and then I've been fortunate enough to do that. Doing a 1 9 or 3 hours away, that's not something I'm typically going to do anymore. I mean, I've done enough of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, you know, I try to limit my travel to at these days to 100 miles because particularly if it's a late gig,
Yeah.
I just don't want to be driving at night as much anymore. It's harder to see at night than it used to be.
We've been there and done that, haven't we, brother?
I have been there and done that. I
I
got the T-shirt too,
yeah.
and a hat,
Yeah.
and a hat.
Yeah, yeah, no kidding. So one of the interesting things about the travel, and I should mention something. If you guys have been doing what my buddy David Fortune suggested that you do long ago, and that is take notes about this. Freddie's had enough experience and enough success in his life that he doesn't have to take every job that comes along. I've
Sure.
been fortunate. I've been doing this for a long time. I don't have to take every job that comes along. And if you will use these suggestions, that these great entertainers are doing, you can work hard enough so that by the time you're 50 or 60 or 70 years of age, you don't have to take every job that comes along. I think that's really important. One other little kind of a marketing thing that we discussed the other day that I want to go back to, and that is about these gig signs.
Oh, okay. I didn't put it up for today's episode, and I should. But
Well,
and,
let me just interject, and I'll have you finish that thought. If you go to freddytripp.com, you will be able to see those signs that Freddie has. But yes, talk to me about that.
uh, Freddie with a Y, Tripp with two P's,
Yes,
and it's basically display, and I just had I took some photos that a photo that I found, and then I put all my contact information in there in pretty bold letters with the big photo. And one of them I have is about 5.5 feet high on a stand, and then another one I have is about 3.5 feet high. But they both got photos, got all my contact information, as well as the QR codes for Cash App and Venmo and PayPal, so people can if they'd like to tip you, they can do it. And every week somebody is, that's easier because people, a lot of times people don't carry cash anymore. And in some jobs I don't put out a tip jar or anything like that. It depends on the nature of the job it is. Sometimes on private parties I won't do it because sometimes the person who's hired you might consider it a little bit insulting. So
sure.
you have to kind of use your own judgment on
Yeah.
that. But anytime you can, sure, put it on there.
Absolutely. I started doing that a while back. As I mentioned, we had seen an entertainer, I think in Panama City Beach, Florida last summer that put one up. His was wide, it was large. His was about 3 feet wide and 6 feet long, and he had a
Sure,
big metal pipe to hold it up with a light in front of it. And he said that the whole thing cost him $200. He's made over
sure,
$2,000 in a fairly short period of time with that. Because as you're right, we are moving, whether a lot of people like it or not, to in many ways a cashless society, and people live on their cell phones. If they're on a cell phone, they like what you do, they can take a picture of it and do it. I was doing a corporate job last night here at the Star in Frisco and had several people that took pictures of mine. And whether they tip me now or come back and do that later or even book me for an event, it doesn't matter. But it's just marketing, and it's a
sure.
really important one. You mentioned in our first podcast together that you have the MBA. I'm sure this was kind of a slam dunk idea for you to put up a sign with a QR code, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And the way it evolved was somebody said, I think the very first job I played, I didn't have it yet, and a lot of the people knew who I was, but when somebody came up and what's your name again? I said, you know what? That's never going to happen again. So I put them up now. I said, whether they like me or not, they might not like me, but they're going to sure know who I am. And sometimes I think about, so second thought, somebody will come up stranger and they'll call me by name, and I'm going like, how do you know my name? She said, well, it's on that 6 foot sign right there. I said, well, duh. You kind of take it for granted. But yeah, one thing about it, if they know your name, at least the chances of them remembering who you are is a whole lot better. And
Well,
plus it particularly with all the information there, I get excited when they come up and take a picture of it, even if they're not leaving a tip, because they think enough of you, they want to remember who you are, and they got that picture in their photos.
absolutely. It's marketing 101.
Sure,
And
right.
I learned a very valuable lesson over 20 years ago, and that is marketing is everything. And this is a very silent but very effective type of marketing because you're letting people know here is how to get in touch with me, here's what I do, etc. Freddie, as we wrap up today, pal, any advice for somebody maybe that's been in a band for a long time or somebody that just likes to play an instrument and sing and they're thinking about getting out there and mixing it up as a solo act? What would you suggest to somebody getting into this part of our business?
Well, a lot of it, I think, a lot of it is the things we've already touched on. Number one, do a variety of stuff. Don't pigeonhole yourself unless you just want to go down the original music or grunge rock era. Well, get ready to sit at home a lot. Uh, the marketing is absolutely important. Whether you do it on the sites, get a website. Uh, uh, Sites like the Bash and the Gig Salad. throw yourself out there and take a chance on it. Do a promo video. That way somebody can always go back. They can get a sample. If you know when I've been asked so many times, well, when are you planning here? We can come see you. Well, if you do a lot of private jobs, there's not those opportunities don't always present themselves. Mm-hmm. Plus, people don't want to drive more than about 5 minutes from the house these days. So that video right there is people hear with their eyes. So do the video, and just keep good records, because Uncle Sam keeps good records. And, we're lucky in this business that these little toys and trinkets and things we buy to do what we do with the tax laws, we can still use a lot. We get a lot of deductions. Every mile we drive, we can deduct it. So we're fortunate compared to a lot of people that just go to work every day. They can't deduct that kind of stuff off their tax. But, keep good records, because, you're the one that's going to be responsible for all of that when it comes IRS time. Other than that, just keep a positive attitude, learn the technology, try to present yourself as at a high level quality as possible. Other than that, just keep at it. Don't give up, because behind every no, there's a yes that much closer.
I like that. I like that a lot. It's also a good idea to drink plenty of water, get enough rest. Exercise is never a bad idea, and know a good chiropractor when you need one, right?
That's exactly right. I had to unload my car this morning because I'm taking my dad to our family reunion tomorrow, so I had to unload my car. A buddy of mine who does a solo thing in the East Tennessee area named Justin Michaels, who's done very well this solo thing, and he did cover stuff for years and years and years, and now he's actually got to the point where he can do a lot of gigs with just his own originals, Appalachian soul, as he likes to call it. But he said the definition of a successful musician is one who doesn't have to unload his car.
Wow. I like that. I like that. I think we'll wrap up. Freddie, thank you so very much for all of this intel. And again, as I said, we've got a lot of actionable information. I'm going to go back and take notes, and I encourage each of our listeners and viewers to do the same.
Freddie with a Y, Tripp with two P's.
Sorry?
Freddie with a Y, Tripp with two P's.
Yes. We'll have that on there as well as the web information. You've been listening to the Band of One podcast. I'm Freddy Wilson, and thanks for joining this week. If you like what we do, please subscribe and share it with other people. If you have ideas for an upcoming podcast, or heck, if you're doing what we're doing somewhere else and you'd like to be profiled, get in touch with me through the Band of One podcast on Facebook or my webpage, which is guitarmadesimpler.com. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.